This morning, analysis of a historic week, an end to the impeachment trial.
Donald John Trump acquitted of the charges in said articles.
The President's State of the Union.
The state of our union is stronger than ever before.
And the Iowa Caucus.
Our campaign in first place.
Plus, the Oscars. Hear our take on the likely winners.
Now from 42nd and 2nd, this is New York's very own Pix 11 News Closeup with Marvin Scott.
Good morning. This was a momentous and historic week, a week that had us all transfixed on the United States Senate, where for the third time in this nation's history, a president of the United States was on trial after being impeached by the House of Representatives. He was found not guilty just hours after he delivered his third State of the Union address. And that came a day after the first test of voter sentiment in this year's presidential election in Iowa, the caucuses that turned out to be a debacle. Lots to talk about with our distinguished panel of analysts who we'll hear from in just a moment. But first, the impeachment trial verdict and the protests it triggered.
Guilty! Guilty!
Within hours of the Senate's acquittal, there were more than 200 organized protests across the country, including this one in Columbus Circle.
Vote them out! Vote them out!
Their swift reaction came shortly after Chief Justice John Roberts placed the final stamp on the 3-week-long impeachment trial.
Donald John Trump be, and he is hereby, acquitted of the charges in said articles.
The final vote of 48 to 52 on Article 1, which accused the president of abuse of power for withholding aid to Ukraine as leverage to get its president to investigate Joe Biden and his son.
Mr. Schumer, guilty. Mr. Scott of Florida, not guilty.
All but one Republican senator voted to acquit the president.
Mr. Romney, guilty.
Mitt Romney became the first senator in U.S. history to vote in favor of convicting a president of his own party in an impeachment trial.
The president asked a foreign government to investigate his political rival. The president withheld vital military funds from that government to press it to do so. Accordingly, the president is guilty of an appalling abuse of public trust.
On the second article of impeachment, obstruction of Congress, Romney joined the vote for acquittal. Romney's break from the party on the abuse of power vote drew an angry Twitter response from Donald Trump Jr., who wrote, "Mitt Romney is forever bitter that he will never be POTUS. He's now officially a member of the resistance and should be expelled from the GOP. While the party's 2008 presidential candidate was being castigated by his Republican colleagues, Romney was winning the praise of protesters.
I'm holding posters of the only man with a moral spine in the Republican Party.
This is what democracy looks like!
They held pictures of GOP senators who exonerated Trump. They were clearly angry.
I'm really angry. I feel like the systems of governance are collapsing around us.
The protesters' anger was the president's elation as he gloated over his victory.
I did nothing wrong. I've done things wrong in my life, I will admit. Not purposely, but I've done things wrong.
I've been put through a terrible ordeal by some very dishonest and corrupt people. They have done everything possible to destroy us, and by so doing, very badly hurt our nation.
I'm pleased now to introduce our panel of political experts. This is Morgan Peckma. He's Pix 11's political analyst. And Chapin Fay is a Republican strategist. And joining us also, Alan Sanders, professor of political science at St. Peter's University in Jersey City. He's a former senior reporter at Time Magazine. Thanks, guys, for coming in. Lots to talk about. Let's start about the impeachment. It was the most partisan impeachment trial in history of the 3 impeachment trials that there were. Do you feel that the final verdict was fair, was reasonable, considering this was a trial without witnesses, without documents?
No, because we had a statement from Mitch McConnell right at the outset who said, I'm not an impartial juror. And so he set the tone for the partisan nature of the judgment, the ultimate judgment, and the ultimate outcome of the case. I mean, he talked to the president constantly. He strategized with the president. And in fact, if you're really an impartial juror, you don't do that. You stay out of it. You actually listen to what the arguments are, and you do allow evidence. So no, I don't think it was objective. I don't think it was impartial. I think it was a partisan endeavor from the very outset, judging very simply from the majority leader's public statements.
You know, it is a partisan thing. That's impeachment is an inherently political process. You know, people, you know, the left and the Democrats' goal was to make this sound legalistic, make it sound like a trial, present evidence. We need witnesses. We need to carefully go over the record, opening statements, closing statements. But it's a political vote. You know, it was always going to be a political vote. The Clinton impeachment was a political vote as well. It was based on the popularity of the president in those states. And, you know, the Johnson impeachment was a mess. I mean, there were accusations of bribery of senators, and, you know, there was the lobbying of the senators back and forth. And so, you know, it was always, this isn't a trial. It's a Senate deliberative process, which is inherently political.
But the Johnson trials, they were cross-party. It wasn't just all one-sided as this one was.
And that's what's changed, Marvin. You know, what Alan is saying is correct. I mean, the senators are 100 of the most political people in the country, and the fact that they made a political calculation as opposed to one that is based upon the evidence that they heard should not surprise anybody. But what has changed is the fact that now we value party over institutions. So the founders thought that the senators would want to wield this power in a way that would benefit the institution, that would be a balance and a check to the presidency. But now both parties take their first allegiance is to the president of their party, and that's what we saw with the senators, the Republican senators.
The majority of voters who were polled afterwards said that they really would have liked to have heard from witnesses who were denied any access to this trial. Shouldn't there have been witnesses?
Of course they should. If you have an accusation, and understand, an accusation is always one-sided. That's true in a normal criminal trial. It would be true in an impeachment trial. The accusation is one-sided. What you need, therefore, is full evidence to determine whether the truth or the validity of the accusation is actually there. The Senate did not allow that to happen. Picking up on Morgan's statement, I want to say that, you know, we will hear more about Senator Romney's statement, because he stood up for the institution. He stood up for the principles, in contrast to the other senators. And I think that was an important point, and it's something that we will see highlighted in the campaign.
How is that going to impact him going forward?
Well, you know, Senator Romney isn't up for re-election until the cycle that President Trump, if he is reelected, will be leaving office. So he certainly had a longer horizon to get out from underneath that vote if it's going to hurt him in any way. I think he's immensely popular in Utah. I think there's virtually no chance of him losing.
Really?
And
because
so,
Utah is a state very much favorable for Donald Trump.
Utah is a very Republican state, but that doesn't mean that is one necessarily aligned for you know, specifically morally with Donald Trump, who has many moral excesses. I think that, you know, Mitt Romney is really a golden child in his own state.
Let's hear from our Republican strategist. Is he finished politically?
He's definitely not finished, but I think he's going to find it a little uncomfortable in Washington, D.C., because it's a Trump town. You know, it's usually the presidential town, right? It was an Obama town for 8 years. It was a George W. Bush town for the 8 years before that. And inside baseball, governmentally, he's going to find things difficult, right? When you need the executive branch to do something in your home state, I don't think he's going to be, you know, seeing warm reception to that. And when the president and his people need something in his state, he's going to go to the other senator. He's, you know, Mitt's cut off. So I think inside baseball, he's going to maybe find life a little bit difficult. But I agree with Morgan. I mean, his horizon is longer. He's popular in his home state, and, you know, it may be uncomfortable at first, but he, you know, this is the United States Senate. He's also incredibly wealthy. There's no consequences to his vote. I mean, let's take a step back. We're talking about wealthy old white men saying yay or nay. So when people talk about courage and cowardice in that context, I think they should, you know, head to Lower Manhattan and see a real testament and monument to courage and cowardice, right? Okay. I mean, I agree with Morgan. I think it'll blow over in 6 years.
Have to take a break. When we come back, want to find out, is this all over? The Democrats are indicating they're going to continue this investigation. We'll explore that when we continue.
You're watching New York's very own Pix 11 News Closeup with Marvin Scott.
Back now with our political analysts, Morgan Peckma, Chapin Fay, and Alan Sanders. The impeachment trial is over. He's been acquitted. But is this whole thing over? And I ask that because Jerry Nadler has indicated they're going to have an investigation and they're going to subpoena John Bolton, the former national security advisor. And the Republicans say they're going to investigate the Democrats, where they got all this from and who the whistleblower is.
Well, I think one thing we've learned in this era is that it's never over. First of all. Secondly, this is the same thing that happens every time the left or the Democrats try and get Trump some way, right? The Mueller report came out and both sides, one side said no exoneration, one side said complete exoneration, and life went on. And who's used the word Mueller in the past couple of weeks? Now impeachment happened, and the House managers wrote an op-ed the other day saying there was no exoneration. Let's be clear. And the president did a victory lap, and I think rightly so. I mean, he was acquitted. It is exoneration. So it is not over. It's going to continue. They're going to try another thing. They're going to keep doing investigations. They're going to keep trying to subpoena people. And I think the only thing that will cause this to fall off is the next drama, which we don't know about, or people are going to focus on trying to beat him at the ballot box, which is where the focus should have been the whole time.
Well, acquittal is not acquittal if you don't have any evidence, if you don't have a trial with with evidence. But it's not over in the sense that this will remain a background issue. The president, of course, is unpredictable. He's vindictive. He may choose to bring it up, and so it will become an issue if he does bring it up in his vitriolic responses to Democrats on Capitol Hill and in the campaign.
But what about the Democrats continuing this?
I think House Democrats are going to be torn. The Nancy Pelosi is going to want to shelve this issue because she's already exposed a number of her frontline members to this problematic situation with pursuing the president. At the same time, the left in the conference is going to be pushing to continue the investigations. I imagine that this will be tamped down to the degree that it was before, but it will continue in some form. But I think that mostly now the Democrats are going to pivot and look to see what is going to be the most, the best playing field for them.
I agree with that. It's going to be background music. If there are any witnesses, it will really be determined by polling and internal polling by the parties. If they believe it's politically useful to do that from the polling, they'll do it. But otherwise, it will just be background noise.
That's true.
Let me just ask this: how is this going to impact the election? Some people say this is just assuring Donald Trump re-election.
Just to underline a point Morgan made, I agree with the overall sentiment about the Speaker wanting this to be tamped down, but I don't think it can be because that leads to your question. We're heading into a presidential election year. The wheels of government do not run smoothly when you have an opposition branch of government versus a president who's on the ballot and up for re-election. So there is zero incentive for Nancy Pelosi's caucus majority to do anything to help Donald Trump or to do anything bipartisan. I don't think you'll see anything. It'll be as bad as it has been partisan-wise. I think it'll be even worse because no one has any incentive to do it. In an election year, in particular, there's a battle, right? And that's what Trump prefers, and that's what the left has to do. So.
Does this outcome favor Donald Trump in November?
I think it's hard to say because, the media and social media whips everybody up into a fervor today. And so it seems like every event is going to have these humongous consequences. But remember, a year ago today, we were all focused that Michael Cohen was somehow going to bring down the president. Now he's all but forgotten. Just like Chapin was saying, Robert Mueller is in the rear view mirror. And so, this is a calamitous situation in Iowa for the Democrats. They're in disarray. Well, a month from now, we could just be saying the opposite, and that's how the cycle moves.
I want to move on to the State of the Union, but I want to hear from Alan. Do you think this is going to help him in the election in November?
It's hard to know. I think the appropriate approach might be something like what Mike Bloomberg does. I'm not talking about the policies that he espouses, but if you pay attention to his commercials, he espouses a policy at the beginning of the commercial, and then he brings in the president as an image in the background to sort of be the background context of the whole thing. That's an appropriate approach to their campaign. We'll see whether the Democrats catch up with that.
I think that's very astute for Alan to point out Mike Bloomberg. I mean, he is the titanic X factor in this race. Unlike any presidential race we've ever seen, a person with unlimited funds to bring an unlimited offensive against the president. We have no idea how that's going to play out, but it will scuttle the field in a way that no one anticipates.
Stay tuned. That's tomorrow's story. Let's look at the other event this week. I want to touch upon the president's third State of the Union address. Seemed to be very partisan, very theatrical. Your take on it? Let's start with our Republican strategist.
I think it was a great speech. I think he highlighted what he's actually accomplished. I think he had the right themes and messages. He hit on drug prices of pharmaceutical companies, which I think is a bipartisan issue. What I was struck by was the Speaker of the House stunt in ripping up the speech. typically the drama is surrounding the president, and I think it benefits him, and I don't say that in a pejorative way, but what we're seeing now is on the left, we're seeing the Iowa Caucus, they can't count their votes, and that's a disaster. You have the speaker ripping up on a public stage, and this is what Americans are seeing. And that's, if you criticize Trump for being, dramatic and get in the mud, how can you support that? And I think, sorry to go back to the point, I think Mike Bloomberg actually comes out smelling the best in this whole situation because he seems like an adult. But
Morgan?
I mean, I think this is illustrative of where we are as a country right now. The president and the Speaker of the House in open warfare, both, disparaging each other in any way that they can. And this shows how the presidency has become just this constant campaign mode. And so, we're not even on any type of conventional terms anymore, but we're at a place that is as adversarial as our country has been in recent memory.
Sounded like his opening salvo for his campaign.
That's right. The whole State of the Union speech was really a campaign speech. It was a campaign rally. You had the Republicans saying 4 more years, 4 more years. Understanding that, then Nancy Pelosi ripped it up because she understood it was a campaign event, and so she ripped it up because it was a campaign event to rally the Democratic base.
All right, I want to move on to the Iowa caucuses. A total debacle. They could not have the results, and I think right now we have just like 1% missing as of this broadcast.
0.1%.
What?
0.1%.
0.1%. But we have a virtual tie here between Buttigieg and Sanders, correct?
That's correct. And, that certainly has put some wind in the sails of the Buttigieg campaign, but it has also vaulted Bernie Sanders into probable frontrunner status, something that he's trying to tamp down because so oftentimes the frontrunner is the first person to get kneecapped, but it certainly puts Bernie Sanders in a strong position.
I want to get this because it seems to be a battle between the liberals and the moderates, and then enter into the picture the unknown factor here. I want to hear this from Mike Bloomberg. He says he's the guy to look at for November.
I think the results from Iowa underscore that we need a candidate who can build a coalition broad enough to unite the party and strong enough to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump and beat him. And that's the candidate that I will be.
Oh, guys, what do you think?
Well, as a New Yorker, I would love to see the battle of two, New York Titans going at it. I think, to Morgan's point, it's a complete X factor. No votes have been cast for Mayor Bloomberg yet. I think he's a good candidate. I think his strategy could pan out well, but we still don't know. I do think he comes out looking like an adult after the ripping in the Iowa caucus. But
of all the candidates in there now, do you see one as the front runner who can defeat Trump?
Too soon. I think the candidate that will emerge the winner is the one that will make the convincing case for returning to normalcy. Everybody, I think, is tired of the vitriolic, frenetic pace of Trump politics.
Last word.
I mean, I think electability is like just a fool's errand. Barack Hussein Obama, no one thought he could be the president. Donald Trump, no one thought he could be the president. What does electability mean? It's the person who wins in November.
That's the key, and we'll have you back. We'll be talking more about that. Thank you, Chapin Fay, Alan Sanders, and Morgan Beckma. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we have Oscars coming up tonight. We'll have some predictions as to who will be walking off with that golden lady. We're back.
You're watching New York's very own Pix 11 News Closeup with Marvin Scott.
The Academy Awards will be handed out tonight in Hollywood, and OG, our entertainment guru, has been gazing into her crystal ball, looking at the potential winners. Who's going to walk out with a golden man?
A golden man, as we've been told. But the thing is, there's going to be so many surprises. Anything can happen. It's the 92nd Annual Academy Awards. And what we know for sure is that there's not going to be a host again this year, but we know there's going to be a ton of performances, not just from the Best Song nominees, but also from Janelle Monáe and Billie Eilish, who the Academy only say will have special performances.
And it'll move a lot faster is what their hope is.
We hope so.
Okay, so let's talk about the Oscar nominees. Let's start with the Best Picture. What do you think?
Best Picture. Everyone is saying that it's going to go to 1917. That's a Sam Mendes World War I movie. And the dark horse would be Parasite. If Parasite wins, it's going to be the first time a foreign language movie has ever won, and it's the 10th time a foreign language movie has ever been nominated for Best Picture.
And it would be the first time it's winning.
Yes.
All right, but what about Joker? Joker has been getting so much play.
Joker will get for maybe for the acting category for Best Actor, which is what Joaquin Phoenix has won for the entire time. But Joker, not so much for Best Picture.
It was a good film, but very disturbing.
Very dark.
Very dark with a capital D.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's talk about Best Actress.
Okay, Best Actress. Like, if we're going by the predictions by pretty much everyone, they're saying it's going to go to Renee Zellweger for Judy, which would make it her second Oscar win for her career. So everyone's saying she did an incredible job, but Fandango just had a recent survey where they surveyed millennials, and millennials said the Best Actress is going to go to Saoirse Ronan for Little Women.
What about Scarlett Johansson?
Scarlett Johansson, I don't know. People, because this is the first time someone's been nominated for the Best Supporting Actress and Best Actress categories. I don't know if that helps her. For me, I feel like when you get 2 nominations, I think it takes away from you getting like all the votes you can get, because someone might say, oh, she's already has this nomination, maybe she'll get the Best Actress. But I think if she does win, it might be for Marriage Story, because she was really, really incredible in that.
Renee Zellweger was absolutely incredible in Judy. She was singing the song her own.
Yeah, and she swept the entire award season too, just like Joaquin Phoenix did for Joker. So it could be going to Renee if the statisticians are correct.
Okay, well, we never know. There are always surprises.
I know.
So let's go on to the Best Actor category.
Best Actor, we said Joaquin Phoenix. It's no surprise because he's been winning all year long throughout awards season. Everyone's like applauding him for his role. It's a really dark role to play. It's a really tough thing to go into because he had to lose 52 pounds for that role. So usually when you lose weight or gain weight, you get an Oscar. Because it worked for Matthew McConaughey.
Now, if he accepts it, is he going to behave himself as he did in the previous awards?
I know, but I think he always behaves. He's just really honest. But people are applauding him for what he said at the BAFTAs, because all he did was call them out for not including people of color. And he said he has to take blame too, because he said he hasn't made sure in the past that all the sets he works on has been diverse. So he's been getting a lot of praise for that.
Okay, let's move on to Best Supporting Actress.
Best Supporting Actress, according to the statisticians, they're saying it would go to Laura Dern. That's what some people are saying. But that Fandango,
Marriage Story.
Yeah, for Marriage Story. Laura Dern for Marriage Story. But Florence Pugh also came up on some of the surveys that they did. Because, like I said, Fandango did a survey of millennials, and they said Florence Pugh from Little Women would have to win that award. But we'll have to wait and see Sunday night. Who knows?
How about Supporting Actor?
Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt. I never make predictions, but I want it to be Brad Pitt. And it's always been Brad Pitt the whole time.
If you want it, that's what's going to happen.
I know,
right?
yeah, right. Because you know why I want Brad Pitt to win? Because I can't wait to see what his acceptance speech is going to be. Because he's been really funny with his acceptance speeches. He's been really cute about it, and people are looking forward to it. This is his year for sure.
Well, he won the SAG Award. Didn't he win the Golden Globe?
He's been winning everything, and he won the BAFTA. He won the BAFTAs too, but he couldn't make it, so he sent them a note. He sent them a note through Margot Robbie.
So
thanking them.
This is for Once Upon a Time.
This is for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is also nominated for Best Picture.
So let's go on to the director, because the director of that film too is also nominated, Quentin Tarantino.
Quentin Tarantino. But then again, word on the street, statisticians are saying that it would most likely go to Sam Mendes for 1917.
That has been getting a lot of traction.
I know. But then some people are saying the old Hollywood members of the Academy might go for Martin Scorsese for The Irishman.
The Irishman.
Yeah.
Now, in 1917, the cinematography, I'm told, I have not seen that one yet. I'm told that the cinematography is really remarkable.
That's what everyone's saying, which is why they're saying Sam Mendes is going to get it, because how do you retell? Everyone's going to be like, oh, it's just a war movie, but it's the way he tells the story, the shot, the continuous shot that he does, it's what blowing people's minds. So if he doesn't get Best Picture, at least he might walk away with Best Director.
Okay, so anything this year? What about, we always hear there's not enough diversity. How about this year's Oscars? Do we have diversity there?
Well, okay, so the category that got the most backlash was the Best Director category, because people were expecting Greta Gerwig to get it for Little Women. But Little Women walked away with 6 nominations. And if they do win for Best Picture, it's a trio of women who produced it. Amy Pascal led the trio of women who produced it. So if they do get the Best Picture win, then that would be their go-to. And then Cynthia Erivo got 2 nominations as well, for Best Song from Harriet, and then for Best Actress.
And 18 women are nominated
exactly.
this year. Yes. Okay. Oji, always a pleasure to work with you.
We can't wait.
We'll see how those predictions work out.
Yeah, we'll see. It wasn't my predictions in case they're wrong.
Oscars are tonight. Thanks for joining us. And that'll do it for our program this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website at pix11.com/newscloseup. Up next, Greta Van Susteren and Full Court Press. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.